Hey folks, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our retro throwback of the Sony Ericsson W518a. This is a flip phone that was pretty popular back in its prime, and it came on contract with AT&T and sold for roughly $100 with a 2-year service agreement. This was back when Sony was still called Sony Ericsson, and this is a Walkman-oriented phone, which meant that music playing was a large emphasis. There are dedicated capacitive controls on the very front that allows you to play and pause your music in addition to skip tracks, and the entire phone is also customizable in the sense you can change out the cover in the front as well as the back panel for different color schemes and options. Otherwise, as far as a multimedia flip phone goes, specs were also decent. There's access to a 3.2 megapixel camera on the very top, there's a front display as well, and it's also pretty slim and petite. Of course, it's not as slim as the Motorola Razr, but it still is respectable and a very lightweight device in general. Other specs included a 262K color QVGA display, which back then was pretty good, again, for a flip phone, as you can see, and also a D-pad that was pretty innovative and futuristic looking. Other features did include Bluetooth on board, but one of the main concerns we had with this phone when we first reviewed it was that there is a proprietary port for both charging as well as for the headset. And for a music-oriented phone that really goes out and sells its MP3 player functionality, we're kind of surprised that there wasn't a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, and that was, again, our main critique. But otherwise, behind the battery cover, you have access to the standards, including a rechargeable lithium-ion battery in addition to the SIM card slot, and there was also a memory stick slot, but instead of using the traditional micro SD card, this one actually used the M2 size card, which is a little bit rare, and of course we don't have any of those today anymore. Taking a look at the hardware of the phone next, it's primarily constructed out of plastic, so it does feel pretty lightweight in the hand. And on the right-hand side, there's access to dedicated volume controls, which is a nice plus. To remove the front plate, there is actually a seal on the side, which you can get your fingernails into, pry around the entire parameter of the phone, and with a little bit of luck, you can basically peel this off and opt for, again, different color schemes that you could customize the phone with. The front display is also extremely shiny and attractive to fingerprints, which make the phone kind of greasy. However, it is very shiny looking, and when the display is actually off, it can't be seen. So that's a pretty cool feature in general. The 3.2 megapixel camera actually produced some pretty decent shots back in the day, and for a flip phone, it actually did alright. Taking a look on the inside of the device next, again, the display on here is decent. It fills up the size of the flip phone, so that's not too small, not too large either. There's also a earpiece, and down below here we have the D-pad. The D-pad was very flush with the surface of the unit, just like the Motorola Razr, which meant that people who like to type and text by feel didn't find this to be the most intuitive solution. With that being said, again, it is pretty easy to use because the keys and controls are all very large. There is a piece of brushed aluminum to make the phone seem a bit more premium, and you have access to a traditional T9 style layout. All the keys are pretty tactile though. There's also a 4-way navigation toggle, up, down, left, and right, but instead of going into the OK, this actually dubbed as the internet browser key, so that was a little bit confusing. If you tapped on that accidentally and you were using this phone on a prepaid plan, then that took you to the browser and used up some of your minutes, which was one of the design quirks. Otherwise, there's hook and end keys, standard application keys, and also the power key dubs as the reject key, and there are 2 soft keys on the top that correspond to different menus after you turn the unit on. In terms of call quality, the 518A back in the day was actually only really middle of the road. You would expect that to be a main emphasis on a flip phone that doesn't really offer anything like Wi-Fi or anything fancy like that. But surprisingly, the reception on here was a little weak, and the microphone wasn't as strong as we wanted it to be, which was kind of a juxtaposition with other Sony Ericsson phones that we saw, again, just a few years ago. So that was one of the main concerns. But in general, though, this device had pretty good battery life and performance. You can run any Java apps, including some basic games here and there, and some very light web browsing was also decent, but it doesn't support the full site version. So, of course, if you're going to be reading complex sites and watching back too many videos, it's not going to be the most enjoyable experience. Taking a look at this phone today, though, we can still see some of the same design elements as on modern-day Sony Xperia handsets, such as that very shiny plastic that is almost sparkly underneath, as well as the design curves are kind of subtle. So we can still see how Sony has progressed and evolved over the years. Anyways, a very interesting retro look back at the Sony Ericsson W518a. And be sure to leave a comment below if this video made you feel nostalgic. Did you have this phone when it was first released? What did you think of it? Anyways, guys, this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.